for research at ChristianaCare, and I'm delighted to introduce our speaker. Just before I do that, I want to mention some upcoming events. Well, first, we are providing CME credits for our Tech Talks and our ID series presentation. So we will distribute this information via email to those who registered for today's event. If you did not register prior to today's talk, you can still obtain CME code information from Deborah Rees, and she will post her email address in the chat box. So our next Tech Talk is April 2nd. So we have Tech Talks every month. And it will be by Oday Dwikat from ChristianaCare. Oday is a data scientist at ChristianaCare, and he will describe the results of a patient satisfaction survey that is implemented at ChristianaCare. On April 28th, which is a Tuesday, we will have an ID series. Dr. Ronnie Scott from Nemours will talk to us about shared therapies for autism, epilepsy, and Alzheimer. So it's a Tuesday, April 28th. You really do not want to miss this presentation. On May 7th, we have another Tech Talk. It's Dr. Ozdemir from Delaware State University. Will talk about exploring NIH All of Us database. And then on June 6th, that will be our last Tech Talk from the fiscal year. Kim Williams and Alex Mapp from ChristianaCare will talk about survey design steps to building a survey. And that will be on a Thursday at noon. So hopefully you have all these events on your calendar. So again, I'm delighted to have Dr. Stephanie Roth from ChristianaCare Libraries giving us a talk about how to conduct a systematic review. Stephanie is currently medical librarian at ChristianaCare, where she manages the literature search service, and she developed a new systematic review service. She supports research teams and leads library sustainability initiatives to position our library as a leader in this area. Prior to working at Christiana, she was librarian for the biomedical research services at Temple University Health Sciences Library, and also team lead for rolling out the systematic review service to the main campus. She obtained a master in library and information science from Drexel University in Philadelphia. She has had multiple leadership roles. For example, she was a Medical Library Association chair of the Systematic Review Caucus in 2022 and 2023, and the immediate past chair in 2023-2024. And she was recently awarded the President's Award from the Medical Library Association. She has a long list of publications, mostly related to systematic and Scopus reviews. She has created and instructed numerous courses on systematic reviews over the years, and she's a sought-after speaker and has delivered numerous lectures regionally and nationally. So we're extremely lucky to have Stephanie as the ChristianaCare librarian and such an expert in systematic review. So thank you so much, Stephanie, to give us this presentation today.
Thank you so much, Claudine. It's really meaningful to me that you invited me to speak here for this group, and I'm just so excited to be here and share my knowledge. I've been waiting for 3.5 years to be invited to speak about systematic reviews. So I'm really excited to be able to do that here.
I'm so sorry we didn't do it earlier.
I'm very patient, so that's fine. If you're here today in the chat, if you can just tell me where you're coming from. It's nice to see everyone here. Feel free to engage. If you have questions along the way, feel free to ask. I'll have different points where I'll break and try to ask if there's any questions. And then just what is your experience with systematic reviews? What brought you here today? And what are you interested in learning? You can answer any of those things in the chat if you would like. I'll go to the next slide. If you're not familiar with who I am, you had a great introduction to who I am, but I had a very humble start to the field. I was a school librarian and I entered the health sciences profession as a medical librarian right from being a school librarian. So it was a fast pipeline into the health field, and I learned a lot immediately. I was hired by one doctor after my master's degree, and he was one of the innovators in the field, I feel like, because he saw that connection between the librarian and the researchers with the systematic review process before I knew of any other librarians really talking about it. And there was nothing at the conferences about it that I attended, and there weren't a lot of publications at that time or even training courses for librarians. And that was about 18 years ago. So that's how long I've been invested in systematic reviews. I've had a lot of lucky, good opportunities along the way, and I've just always have been teaching alongside as I'm learning, teaching others at the same time. So teaching has been something that I've always enjoyed doing. And I just want to also say, you know, the doctor that I worked with is no longer with us, unfortunately. And I just wanted to dedicate a lot of what I'm doing since working with him for all of his visions and conversations with me and motivating me as a young learner, as a young person trying to figure all of this out and showing me that anything is possible and that the process may have seemed difficult or hard at first, and it still always is hard. It never really gets easier. And even teaching and sharing knowledge never really gets easier. But always those first, you know, motivational talks by him are something that I hold close to my heart. And I hope to inspire others wherever I am at ChristianaCare now and even beyond the walls of ChristianaCare to help inspire, you know, that new generation of researchers, especially in a time when it's very difficult and, you know, a time of less funding and a time of, you know, changes in the system with technology advances, with AI. I just think the foundational things that got us to where we are right now are still going to be really important. And that's something I think you'll see as a theme in my talk. And then learning outcomes are here. They're actually borrowed from learning outcomes that I was able to publish when working at Temple University with my colleague at the time, Natalie Taggy. They still exist. We did an update a couple years ago, but some of the links may not be updated, but I use them still myself. Everything that I've ever created, I believe in because I still use it myself. So I create these things to help me, but along the way, they have helped others too. So what is evidence synthesis? Evidence synthesis is kind of the umbrella, so we can't really talk about systematic reviews without also mentioning evidence synthesis, and you'll often hear evidence synthesis and systematic reviews thrown around, and I do it too, because I call systematic reviews what is probably evidence synthesis, but systematic reviews refers to just one review type within the whole evidence synthesis. But evidence synthesis is about a process of bringing a large scope of information from a range of sources, both published and unpublished studies together to find all of the research that exists on a topic. The evidence synthesis is supposed to be unbiased and reproducible, so it's a little bit different than your regular, typical, traditional narrative review that you usually see. And sadly, I want to say that probably 98% of all reviews that are published are probably actually just maybe a little more robust narrative reviews, but they don't hit on all of these things of being unbiased and reproducible and transparent. So we're seeing a lot of problems in research, but evidence synthesis refers to that larger topic of studies, examining other studies and research and pulling it all together. And then the systematic review is just one piece of that. And it's systematic review is the study that kind of shaped a lot of the other studies, and a lot of the other ones are modeled after. So now it's like a whole field of evidence synthesis. But it really started with this one idea of taking all of these studies on a very focused research question to try to come and answer that question using methods that reduce and minimize bias, because you can never prevent bias fully, but it tries to minimize it the best possible using these very robust and you know, very challenging steps that we must follow, but they're there for a reason. They exist for a reason. to be reproducible so that we can go back and trust information because we can go back and trace how they actually got those studies, how they selected each individual study has to be traced back and reported on, and then how they conducted each part of this process. And the nice thing about the system review that I found is that it's very concrete. So you just stick to the process, or just follow the process. So once you know the process, it's much easier. So there's a step by step by step process, and you're not supposed to really skip around and jump steps. It's all sort of laid out for you. And the one thing that I found that was helpful when learning is to just look at one small step and then just try to master that and then move on to the next. And that's something I try to do with teams too. Like, don't think about the whole systematic review because you're going to get overwhelmed. Just think about what comes next, the first part, the second part, and it kind of builds from there. And if your first systematic review is usually just for practice, you may not even publish it, but you're learning this process, and that's probably the most helpful part. So these are made, this is what healthcare decisions are based upon, or, the evidence. So how do you get the evidence? Well, you have people doing systematic reviews to try to answer, what is the evidence? So when we say evidence-based, we should be looking at systematic reviews too. But the problem that I mentioned earlier is that we are in a crisis. The state of systematic review model is not really working the way that it was designed to work. And I think there's just a misunderstanding of what it is. It's a term that we hear a lot that's thrown around, and I think most people think it's a very robust literature review. And the term systematic is not really understood. So I'm hoping after today that if you have any questions, that you understand a little bit more of how to conduct this type of study. And then you can teach others, and that's what's really going to turn this around, is the teaching part of it and helping to explain to others, well, that's not quite a system review, and speaking up on teams. And that's where my role comes in as a librarian, to say, I know this process inside and out. Okay, that's not how you're supposed to conduct a review. So I can spot those errors very fast. And I think that's key. It wasn't always easy to speak up, but this is my life. Like, I devoted my whole career to systematic reviews, and not actually on purpose. It's just that systematic reviews kept finding me and pulling me back in somehow, because there were 2 points in my career where I could have walked away for good and have never touched another review. But I just felt like it just kept finding me. And then I didn't talk about the whole story of becoming a librarian, but a lot of that was a chance thing as well. So I feel like the fact that I'm still here talking about systematic reviews 18 years later shows that maybe there's still more opportunities in this area in the future, or I probably wouldn't have been doing them anymore. So I have a lot of hope for future, even in this sea of, poor reviews rising to the top. And then we see a lot of bad publishers, bad publishing practices, predatory publishers, scam journals that are out there, paper mills. They're just trying to output, taking advantage, of what a review is supposed to be, and just, taking advantage of researchers who want to publish. So sometimes there's these promises of faster and easier, but this process was not designed to be fast or easy. So you always need to remember that too. And then these tools can be used to supplement the process, but I'm worried if they're misused that it could help exacerbate this problem that we're already seeing even before the onset of AI. There are people in development that are trying to create tools using AI to help facilitate the process of helping with the reproducibility crisis and the transparency, and trying to minimize the reviews that are outdated or low quality and redundant. There's too many reviews about the same things. There's a lot of people trying to solve this problem. And also I'm trying to do that too by being an advocate for the process. And I'm not someone that's opposed completely to AI. As before AI, I was already thinking about these things before a lot of people were really talking about it. And with one of my colleagues at Temple, Alex, we worked on a machine learning methods for systematic reviews, rapid scoping review. And that came out of me attending classes that he was teaching on text analysis, and then talking to him about this as a possibility for systematic reviews. And, I was thinking maybe there's not a lot out there about it. And then when we conducted this review, we realized, oh, there's a lot of people talking about this. We just weren't really hearing it where we were, but we ended up with over 100 studies to go through. So I have been through the process myself. This wasn't my first review. When I worked with the doctor many years ago, he didn't just have me do the search, but he had me go through the whole process. So I was always going through the process. So I feel like that I'm really helpful with our researchers here because I understand what it takes and what it's like going through the process. But in the outcome of this study, we found that still the human intelligence was still needed and necessary, and that these tools could be used as a supplement to the process. And then after that, AI kind of happened. I think I went on maternity leave and I came back and like the whole world's changing, what's happening? And so I had to get a little bit up to speed, and I'm still trying to do that. Um, and then I left this slide sort of blank on purpose because I want to share the most current information that I could. And I, had some phone calls I was making with people that are creating these tools to just kind of figure out what their thoughts are going forward in the future. Because what I was seeing was that some of these tools like Auto, SR, and Sustainable Knowledge end to end, is they're designing these tools to sort of it seemed like to me they're trying to outsource librarian. They're trying to design these tools to do everything for the entire review process. So there's the input and then the output of doing the full systematic review end to end, and not just to update a systematic review, but to do one from the onset. And then I was concerned that they were leaving the librarian out of the picture. So I did email one of the developers at like midnight with the title Librarian in the Loop just to see what their thoughts were. And he emailed me back right away. So I was able to speak to both of the developers of those tools actually. And it was encouraging because what they told me they didn't think that, well, they didn't think the tools would be a full replacement of the librarian. Um, the researchers could use them to help locate articles and build searches, but they felt like the expertise of the librarian was still vital to the process, and that it was reassuring to hear from them that they weren't designing these to replace that at all. So that was really hopeful. And they're also concerned about the same problems about the reproducibility, the crisis, and all of that. And actually, that one paper was authored by one of the developers of one of these tools. But these tools are already here. They're already available in like beta test mode, so you can contact them and try to get access to test them out. This seems to be like it could be the future. We already have a lot of systematic review tools already that embed large language models, machine learning, and AI in their interfaces already. But we haven't seen too many tools that can do the whole process for someone end to end like that. So I think that's going to be the new future, but it's still good. But I think as librarians and researchers, and if you're statisticians, that you should be trying to figure out what is your path in this process in the future, and how can you get involved, and are the people developing the tools, are they thinking about you in the process? And one of the things about the tools that they're developing is they still have the human in the loop, where the human is, it's still up to the humans um, oversight to decide or to not use something from AI and to evaluate the articles and everything. So it can do it within hours instead of years. But there's still the human in the loop in there, that it may take a little bit longer for the human to be involved, but the final production time is a lot less than it would be with just the human process. And one of their arguments is that humans are just not very good at doing systematic reviews, and it's hard to not it's hard to counter that argument when you see, like on the previous slide, how poorly done a lot of the reviews are. So their hope is that this could actually help with the process rather than encourage more of the previous problems. So I'm not sure if it will work, but it's interesting that um, combined together with experts and these tools, there is a future for where they will work with the human. The big thing is the human in the loop, and I say the librarian in the loop part. Um, so it's something to think about where you see your future with this, where you see your expertise, where it can be helpful in the future as the methods start to change or incorporate AI more in the workflows. Um, but I think knowing the process is really key because both of them said that you really need to have a good protocol still. So that's the piece where I think like librarians can still help. And that's something that I do now is helping to really help researchers do a good protocol or formulate the question. Those things are going to be even more important. It's garbage in, garbage out. The tool's just not going to work. So you really need to understand what you're doing, and you shouldn't use an AI tool if you don't understand the process yourself for that step without involving experts. So I think it is interesting to learn. And then this part is now going back into the steps. So besides the crisis and AI, but then, okay, what is the process? So the first part is developing your topic, brainstorming ideas. The whole goal in healthcare for system review is to improve patient lives. So it doesn't have to be something that you just like try to come up with, but really think about your patients, the people in your life. It could be family members, yourself. What's really going to help with healthcare right now, and where can you help, and where do you have expertise in? What is your domain of interest? And then we don't want redundant reviews that repeat what someone else has already done. So before you select your topic, you should always look to see, did somebody else already do this before you? That's why I said look before you leap. So you don't want to go into this process blinded or foolish. You really want to do your homework first. So I think even though the AI tools can do this process a little bit faster, that part is still going to always take time before you can get to the tools, figuring out the question. And then you still need a team. So you should involve team members. The minimum is two, but I think that should be changed because that two minimum has left librarians out of the picture sometimes as authors. So I think it should be three or more as a minimum, because if you're including a librarian, that would automatically be three because they should get co-authorship too. And then the biostatistician, if you're including a biostatistician, that would be four right there. So they should also get authorship. So that two minimum is mainly refers to the two minimum per stage of the review that have to go through the process independently and blinded. So each stage is done independently and blinded, but not the search. The search is usually done by the librarian. Um, but your team members really matter, so make sure you pick experts, people with domain knowledge, those that fill knowledge gaps that you don't have yet, those that are knowledgeable in the process, a methodologist, a librarian that has expertise in this process, the biostatistician, at least one person who I would say if you enjoy the subject matter, I see teams drop off sometimes because one person is like very interested in the subject matter, and then you have someone else that just volunteers or it's their friend, but they're not as invested in the topic. And then sometimes it falls through because you can't just have one person going quickly through these stages and trying to get to the next one. You always are waiting for that second person to get through them too. So also consider the time commitment for that second reviewer. Are they actually in reality able to devote the time that it takes? And then additional team members, I had already mentioned them. Librarian should be for all reviews. It doesn't have to be a medical librarian, but a librarian with systematic review expertise. But in the health sciences, if you have a medical librarian, that's great. a statistician or biostatistician to help with the meta-analysis. They also help you in the design phase of the study, just like the librarian. So you should work with both of them at the beginning of the study to help inform the protocol, because the protocol is what's going to inform the rest of the project. And then you can involve a qualitative researcher, analysis, social scientist, if you're including qualitative research or mixed methods research in your review. Those would require more of a thematic analysis and coding. So this is a different specialty, so you should involve someone with that, or at least an interest in learning those things. And then the timeline for review is long. It's 12 months is the standard minimum. It depends on the question, the topic, the number of articles that are retrieved, administrative time of team members, dedicated research time, the expert experience in systematic review. So if it's your first review, it could take a lot longer. All these things go into account, and there used to not be a way to really assess how long it would take. But there is a tool called Predictor where you can put all of that information in, and it will give you a pretty accurate timeline for how long it should take. And that timeline might surprise some people. And then I mentioned there are other review types. So I know a lot of people are interested in, what are the differences in some of these review types. This is a very brief overview. This can be like a whole talk, or you can do a whole talk on each one itself, because that's how involved each study is. But most of them mimic the systematic review. So if you understand the systematic review, you can do any review. So I think the best one for learning purposes is probably the systematic review. The systematic review and meta-analysis are used interchangeably sometimes, but the meta-analysis is a review that um, includes a statistical analysis of the data. And that study design incorporating that analysis, it can be called a meta-analysis. Meta-analysis are usually based off of several studies. They need to pull the data from several studies. They need to have enough studies to do it. So I think that oops, I forget. Oh, the systematic review doesn't have to have a meta-analysis either. So, but what I was trying to say is that the meta-analysis must have some form of a systematic review for it to be considered a full meta-analysis. Usually, I guess I'll go into the meta-analysis a little bit more in another slide. And then the rapid review. Oh, sorry, I don't know if I mentioned that this might be focuses on a very narrow question, so you shouldn't have a really broad question for them. And they're comparing effectiveness, so it's either the effectiveness of like one intervention or the comparison with another. It could be a treatment. So that's it takes a more comprehensive approach as well. And then the rapid review is also based on effectiveness with a more rapid approach, but it's a more condensed version. So it has some shortcuts, but it mimics the systematic review stages very closely, but there are some shortcuts put in there, but it still does a quality assessment, so that part can't be omitted. And then the scoping review, I was also going to say the rapid review is used for like when there's things that need a rapid assessment of the literature, like in COVID, we needed to find information a lot faster, so then we saw a lot more rapid reviews. And then there's scoping reviews. They answer a broader question, have a broader scope. They may have multiple questions. They're more exploratory and sometimes done pre-systematic just to see what information exists, what studies are published around this area. And then there's other review types too. I won't get into, but we have the mapping review, mixed methods reviews that look at qualitative and quantitative studies. And qualitative reviews are systematic reviews focused on just qualitative literature, so their analysis at the end would be a little different. Living systematic reviews are reviews that live on forever. Sometimes they do have a stopping point, but they're reviews that are continuously updated at pre-specified intervals. And then overview of reviews are systematic reviews of systematic reviews. And then I haven't had to do one yet, actually, But I remember in the beginning, I thought that that was just some kind of joke, that there couldn't be a systematic review of systematic reviews, but it does exist. So you can get very, very meta with these. Then I just put some sample questions that I pulled from actual studies, or um, I just kind of pulled them from combination of different studies to try to illustrate some examples. So for an example of an effectiveness question for systematic reviews, you have what is the effectiveness, and then versus placebo to treat something. So that would be a good example or classic systematic review question. And then the rapid review is also a effectiveness question about digital solutions for contact tracing. And this is, I needed that rapid question for the infectious disease outbreaks. And then the scoping review casts a wider scope. So it's asking, what is the evidence in here? You want to know it, say like what is the scope of evidence, but I guess that would be really obvious. It was a scope review, but what is the evidence? When someone says they want to know what is the evidence for something, then I'm like, okay, that's a scoping review, because often they'll ask for systematic review, and then by the question is really what drives the review type. So I think some people were wondering when to do a systematic review or scoping review, but it's going to be based on how you frame that question and what what your goals of the review are, because they have two very different goals. And then that brings us to the most important part of this process. It's going to be the most important part of the process with the introduction of some of these, as we embed more and more the AI tools into the process. But we're really going to have to spend a lot of time setting up a detailed plan of all the methods, what we plan to do for each of those methods, and to make sure we understand those methods too. So before you even conduct a systematic review, you should make sure you do your homework and you understand, well, what is a systematic review in the first place? What are the methods that I'm supposed to be doing? And what are the standards and the guidance for doing them? And then making sure you get other people that have experience doing this too, that can join your team and can help start drafting this detailed plan for you. Most of the protocols I see are not detailed at all. And then most of them will try to write the search portion. And I'm like, that's the part you didn't have to do, because that's my part. So I think there's a misunderstanding that the protocol is about the search, but the protocol is supposed to be about the whole paper, like the whole review. And I think that happens because librarians are really good at writing the search methods, so ours are really detailed. And I think that's why when people look at protocols, they see that part is really detailed and the other parts are not always detailed. So I'm always trying to get teams to see, like, if this is how I'm writing it and this level of detail, then your sections also need to be written and report, because the methods need to be written in a way that someone can take them that just found out about your study and doesn't have any prior knowledge about your study, and they can go through those steps, step by step by step. So if they can't do that and that process breaks at any point, then your review is not transparent, it's not reproducible, and then therefore it's not a systematic review. So that's why 98% estimate that are published are not actual systematic reviews if they can't do those things. And it all starts with the design of the protocol. So it's a make or break part of the review. And the protocol does get registered in the process some point before data extraction. After that, it's too late. Like Prospero won't even register it after that. Um, those registries are listed here. And then there's a reporting guidance using Prisma P for protocols. And I didn't mention, but there's a Prisma for the whole systematic review process. And then there's extensions for the different review types. They're working on an extension for AI too. So the extensions are really interesting to see how many more extensions are coming out every year. And we're expected to report following those. So it's not a lot of problems. Like you can tell sometimes a review that's not going to be very good when you read the methods and they said that they followed Prisma, and then you're like, okay, this is not going to be good because Prisma is not something you can follow. It's supposed to be how to report. And then a lot of times I go and I check, okay, you said you use Prisma. Now, did they actually use Prisma? So I go through the checklists and one by one, and I don't have to go very far in the checklist. Most of the time, they mentioned it, but they didn't follow it. So if you're going to mention something like that, don't just copy it because you saw it in another review. Actually look at Prisma and follow it. That's going to set you apart as being a high quality, good review. And that part alone, I mean, that's each of these little tidbits is really going to help you do a high quality review. And that's where I'm trying to get teams. That's my goal, is to get teams to go there. I don't want them to do a poor review that's going to be part of the crisis and adds to research waste and redundancy. I want them to do one of those best reviews they can. And someone's best is going to be different for each person. So I don't expect miracles either. I just expect a little dedication to the process and an effort to learn the process and to actually apply the things that I'm talking about, like in this presentation. And then wherever you end up after that, it may not be perfect, but it's still going to be better than a lot. And then the sample protocol template to guide the protocol, there are some templates available. So I'm just showing you a copy of one template that's available. This is just very condensed to try to fit a little bit on the slides, but it just models like the regular flow of a regular research paper with the introduction, inclusion criteria, methods. So it's not much different than the structure of outlining a paper. And then the Prospero, they changed their form for registry a little bit. It used to be the protocol, but now it's not considered like a full protocol. So you have to attach a full protocol. So you should still be drafting a full protocol alongside completing the registration list of everything that you have to include for that. And the protocol, um, creating the protocol is something I give feedback on with my teams. There's a lot of back and forth. I have a process where I actually don't start the searching until that draft looks pretty good, and then I can start. They don't have to register it yet, but I want to see that they put in the work, they understand the process, they're following, feedback. Um, those are all signs that this is going to be a good partnership, because it is a partnership. So then, and that piece might not be expected of the librarian sometimes. So I think it is a little bit of a learning curve to work with someone that is going to give you critical feedback at that point. I think researchers are used to just going to the library and getting into search whenever they need it. But I've been operating a little bit differently here, and but it's always for the researcher's best interest. So at this point, I'll check in and see if anyone has any questions. Feel free to drop them in the chat. And feel free to unmute too if you would like. Or anything interesting up to this point that might change the way you conduct systematic reviews.
So I have a
Feel free to
question,
share.
actually.
Oh, sure.
What is the advantage of registering to a Prospero, I guess, yeah, to registering the protocol? What's the advantage of doing this? Register the protocol.
Yeah, it is the gold standard, so there is an expectation that the protocol will get registered, and a lot of the publishers are now requiring it. They used to not, but it's one of the requirements for doing the review. It's what sets it apart from like the narrative literature review. And it's designed to help as one of those robust steps to minimize bias. So by reporting the protocol, and also is a plan for the team on how they'll conduct the review. So it outlines everything very early and it establishes clear parameters. So that way, when you get to screening and when you get to data extraction, you have the criteria already in front of you. So there's no going back to the team and trying to figure that out. It's already pre-established. So it's actually essential. You can't really do this process at all without having one, and anything without one is not going to be considered, a systematic approach.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I don't see any other questions, so I'll continue. Okay. Usually researchers get to the search and um, this is where the review begins for them. But all of those other stages, and it took us a while, even in the presentation, to get to the search point. So that just shows you the level of involvement before the search even can happen in the process. But the search is usually done by a medical librarian. It should be something I look for. I peer review for a lot of system reviews, and I look right away. I can tell if it's going to be a high quality or low quality review by the librarian involved in the type of involvement. So I right away will look to see, was there a librarian co-authored on the review? And then if not, I'm like, okay, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they're in the acknowledgements and I'll look there. Then if they're not in the acknowledgements, I start getting a little bit scared and then like, okay, I'll still give them the benefit of the doubt. So then I start going through and looking for all the hallmarks of a good quality system review, like I just mentioned, a lot of them to you. And then I start, okay, I'm not seeing them. So I've seen a lot of red flags. So then that librarian involvement is so key in the process. And that's the thing that I'm worried about with the AI like tool developers is they're not involving librarian experts in the development of the software and tools. And I think that will be a little bit of an oversight. So I really hope that they do work more collaboratively with us in the future and as part of the design in the tools, because you can't really do a systematic review, a really good systematic review without the librarian involved or librarian in the loop, just like humans should be in the loop of the process. Because the experience and the knowledge of searching databases is not something that just happens. It's something that happens after years of practice and then knowing the different nuances of each database and the syntax and the Boolean operating language and the mesh terminology and subject headings. I don't think that the typical researcher has an understanding or grasp of that. And then when I look at the studies that are published, they clearly do not. So a systematic search is much different than a regular search, and it requires a high level of training and knowledge and by librarians that have expertise in systematic reviews or are willing to learn how to create a more systematic search. And then Prisma S is the reporting standard for the search portion of the review. So we do have some guidance for that librarians are aware of and will follow. So your review will follow the best practices working with librarian. And then we are authors too. We've been left out for many years. I was lucky with the doctor that I worked with that he gave me authorship. And then I always just knew that I could get authorship after that, so I never settled for less. And then if anything, I've pulled away from authorship when the reviewers are not willing to meet me halfway or to meet some of my requirements to drive them to doing a high quality review. So authorship is a choice, and we found that, there are some problems that occur between librarian and researcher. So one of the things that I've done is created a standard called Swirl SR, standards for working with research librarians on systematic reviews. That's pretty new. It's only been around for about a year. And then there's COPE. I found COPE later. They're actually already doing a lot of this. They're the Committee on Publication Ethics, and they promote and research integrity and scholarly publication. Oh, that's interesting. Apparently my computer wants to do a restart soon, so hopefully it doesn't do it during the talk. um, and then there's ICMJE. That's not specific to librarians either, but it's the how to manage authorship roles and expectations on teams, and it clearly outlines what constitutes an author. And then there's the MLA statement about librarians librarians as authors on systematic reviews. So there's a lot out there to support, librarians being co-authored, and then what does that mean on a team? So co-authorship means they are equals on the team and they have a fair say in the methodology and the reporting of the review, and it's their responsibility as well to make sure that that's accurate and well done. And then we move on to screening. So the librarian has done a lot of heavy lifting with the search part of it, and a lot of the teams have not done the heavy lifting part of the review yet. So then when they get the studies, that's when the reality usually sets in, and that's where there's sometimes a disconnect between the search results too, even though there's a lot of communication about that earlier on. But the screening is very time intensive and it's a lot of work. And that's why I love the AI tools. A lot of them are focused, and a lot of the machine learning tools that exist and systematic tools are focused around the screening stage to help with the efficiency of that step, because it is a lot of work. But there's two phases to that. There's the title abstract screening. In that phase, you don't track reasons. And then after that, there's a full text screening stage. And in that stage, you do track reasons. And then there's the prism of flow diagram that you may have seen. That gets all of the counts from the librarian from the search, and then it gets the screening counts, and then how many studies you're going to have after the full text. All the studies that you say yes will be the studies that you then use as your analysis later, and they become part of the systematic review. This process is done by two independent and blinded reviewers. This is where the blinding of the review occurs. Um, and then the screening is based on the protocol. So that's why the protocol is important too, because you already have predefined a lot of this criteria and outlined, what is the inclusion exclusion criteria for the study. If you have very well defined parameters for what is included, it's easier to make those decisions later. Screening may have to go through some piloting first to make sure all the reviewers are understanding of the criteria and are making the right decisions. And then there could be a third reviewer that can serve as a tiebreaker for when the two reviewers don't come to an agreement. So if one person says yes and one person says no, it can hold back that study before a third reviewer makes a decision about it. And then there's software for this, and then there's other software now with AI too, but these are some of the commonly used tools for screening. Some of them are at a cost, and some of them are free. Rayon has a free version that's good for most researchers to use. It's very easy to use. Then after screening, you get to data extraction. So you can celebrate screening, but then you have a lot of work with the data extraction. It's more work than even I have realized when I've been on teams. And a lot of that is like piloting the forms that you'll use as a guide to to know what data to extract from each study. And it's very specific to each review. So there are templates available when it's good to get started to see what are some of the earlier things, but then a lot of the outcomes and things are up to the individual review. And all this process is also done independently by two reviewers and blinded. So they're not supposed to be working together on the data extraction. And then you can have a third typebreaker as well that serves when there are errors and things in the collection where things aren't adding up. And this process, the methods have to be outlined. You can share your data extraction templates and forms as part of the appendices of the study. So the more transparent you can be about your methods, the better it is for the review. Then there's sample data collection forms to help in the Cochrane Handbook that help guide you through this process and how to select the forms and which one might be best for your team. And there's different software that can also help with the creation of templates.
Just listening. Clear my
And
code. Okay. Sorry.
then Critical appraisal is one of the last steps of the review, and it's where you're going to combine the studies together as if they're one study. So whether you do it narratively or through a statistical analysis. This is a part where if you have quantitative data or studies, you're going to be involving the biostatistician to help with this part. But you don't need to do a meta-analysis. So you should only be doing a meta-analysis when your participants, interventions, comparisons, and outcomes are similar across studies to make sure that it's clinically meaningful to do the meta-analysis, or otherwise it can spin the results a little bit. And you don't need to do a meta-analysis to do a good systematic review. You can have a systematic review that just uses a narrative synthesis, so there's no requirement that you have to do meta-analysis, and only if their studies are similar enough where it makes sense to do one. And then there's also grading the evidence. That's not done in every review, but Cochrane reviews use grade, and in creating guidelines, they use grade. So it's something to be aware of and maybe pursue including. That looks at the evidence of each outcome. And then there's tables and software to help build those tables. The tool RevMan can be helpful in doing the meta-analysis, and that's what Cochrane uses. And I just showed here one of the outputs is like a forest plot as part of that. And then you could celebrate when you get to here because you're almost done, but you have the writing part still and then the publishing. But to make the writing easier, you should have started the writing in advance. So I usually tell teams when you're waiting for the search, start the writing then. So start early. So you can start drafting your discussion section or introduction, background sections first, and you can create a template based off the protocol already of like that shows what you plan to do, and then you can start filling that in as you move through the study. So that makes the writing part a little less overwhelming, and then using a citation manager for citing sources. And then the librarian would be writing a search methods section for you as a co-author, so you don't have to worry about that part, and then providing the search appendices. Just to make sure you stay true to the evidence, always don't try to spin the conclusion so it works in your favor. Don't try to spin the results of the meta-analysis. Just report and be honest about what your approach was throughout the review, what your methods were, and then what you found at the very end. As long as you stay true to all of that, you should be fine. And then publishing, just be aware of scam, predatory journals. You don't want to do all this work and then publish to, what I would call low-hanging fruit. We always want to go for the very best that we can. If we don't get there, there's other journals that we can try to publish to. Always check your authorship rights. There's Open Policy Finder. This can be helpful for checking what are your archival rights for the document, for uploading any versions and things like that. So you don't just sign your authorship agreement. You may be able to negotiate some of those terms and what licensing is used and what rights you have to the research. So always it's something just to be aware that you have a lot more rights with that than what most people realize. And then for quality review, make sure you always check and stay true to the standards, the reporting guidance. The Equator Network is for all studies, but you can not just reviews, but you could find reporting guidelines for different study types. Prisma is used for reviews of intervention studies, and it's something you hear a lot, but not everyone follows. So make sure you download the checklist, the flow diagrams, look at the extensions. They're all really vital to doing a high quality review. Journals should also be holding their researchers to these standards and reporting guidance. There's also National Academies is the standards. They're updating them right now as we speak. So that should be coming out soon, something to watch for soon. The responsible use of AI is a big thing, so the raise should be fall if you're using AI. The Cochrane Handbook is like the guide to doing a systematic review for Cochrane, but it's used around the world as sort of that gold standard for systematic reviews in healthcare. Swirl SR is my own thing, but it's used by other librarians as well for the standards of working with us on the team. And then there's different position statements published about the use of AI, the ethical and responsible use of AI. So it's something to be aware of. And you can do a review without AI, without a tool. When I started, truthfully, I didn't use any tools, and I carried around, like a suitcase of articles with me and brought them back to and from my home and work. And I did everything by hand. So there was a time when that's how these were done. So you can always, that was the slow way of learning, and sometimes the slow way is okay. Going through the process slowly and going through it correctly is actually sometimes better. And then, they say the same thing with strength training, don't go and just lift the heavy weights, but go and, make sure your form is right first, and then you slowly, gradually build on with the weights. So I think it's the same thing with systematic review. Don't just jump to do the systematic review to get to the end goal that you want. Take sometimes a little bit of the slower approach, learn the methods, go through the steps, work with the librarian, then maybe throw on some tools and AI on top of that when you're ready, but you don't have to at first, and really embed yourself in the process. And the process is where I think the beauty is. This is the thing that I enjoy. I actually don't want to just input and output things into a tool. It's been a beautiful journey learning and going through the process with so many teams, and the serendipity of that. And I think that's where the real learning has happened for me. So I feel like you do lose a little when you try to shortcut that process. And just showing you that we have database offerings at ChristianaCare. We have 2 medical librarians here at ChristianaCare. We're enthusiastic. We love system reviews. We want to do our very best on them. We want you to do your best on them. And we're just excited about the future and going into the unknowns with you. And I think that there will always be a place for doing and understanding the process and doing a high quality, well done review, regardless of what you use to get there, but that you followed the basics, and there's some beauty in that as well. So thank you. And if you have questions, I'll take them quick. I know we have like 1 minute left.
Well, thank you so much, Stephanie. This was really, really enlightening. Any questions from the audience? You may not hear me well. Any questions from the audience? Yes, we can stay a few more minutes. Well, I have a question,
Yes.
if you don't mind.
Oh, sure.
So you mentioned the screening step, and I totally understand. The two blinded to each other reviewers. But how does the software help there? Because you said that there were softwares that were helping. If you need to have, in any case, the 2 blinded reviewers, how does the software help there? What does software do?
The software helps with making sure that the process is blinded, and by the 2 independent reviewers can't see what the other person's doing because it will blind that process for them. So you're only looking at the studies that you have, and then it helps you to sort them with the yes, no, and maybes. So you have to, even if you did it by hand, like when I did it by hand, I was putting things into actual like piles. So like a yes pile, I have a no pile, and I have a maybe pile. That was actually like the easiest way to learn this. But the tool is doing the same thing because you have like the green checkbox in Rayon, and then the X if it's not included. And I forget what the yellow, maybe there's a
So
yellow
they
for
list
maybe.
all the publications and you just say yes, no, yes, no, yes, no,
Oh,
this
yes.
type of things.
The
I
librarian will
see.
give you the citations. So when you do the search with the librarian, we output them in the RAS file. You can import it into a citation manager or software like Rayon or Abstract or Covidence, and there's others out there. And then that format that we give you is compatible with those. So it's just an easy import. And then you have all the citations there. And then you can start screening right away. And then it's
I
blinded with
see.
the other reviewer.
I see. Oh, okay.
And we could do training those tools too. I have a lot of experience teaching Rayon and Abstractor and have helped teams in Covidence, and Marlo, our other librarian here, is experienced in a lot of that too. So you have access to 2 librarians, and if anyone partners with us here at ChristianaCare with your team at ChristianaCare, they should be able to access training with us and databases too.
Sounds great. Any other questions? Well, I think lots of people are interested by your presentations, so we will send it. Well, thank you again. This was, again, as I mentioned, very enlightening and absolutely fascinating.
Thank you.
And we will